Welcome to LaunchBase, a fast-paced podcast exploring the latest in tech funding and product launches. In under 30 minutes, we break down key trends, interview industry leaders, and uncover what's driving the next wave of innovation. And now your host, John Radford.
Hello and welcome to another episode of LaunchBase. This is the podcast, it's the only one, that dives into all things tech, business and innovation in under 30 minutes. So I'm your host, John Radford, and each week I chat with individuals shaping the landscape of tech. So today I am excited to be joined by Jack Henderson. Jack is a serial founder and entrepreneur who's built and scaled multiple £1 million ventures without taking a penny of investment. Actually, he has recently, but his first ventures he didn't. So we'll get onto that. Anyway, from medical recruitment, AI-powered staffing platforms, Jack's mission is clear. Cut out the middleman, return control to organizations that actually deliver care and education. Now he's leading 3 ventures, Kerro AI, Flexo AI, and Flexo Teach, from his new base in Dubai. So in this episode, we're going to dive into how Jack bootstrapped a 20 mil plus business and how he avoided funding at the start, how AI is disrupting staffing in both healthcare and education, and what he looks for as an angel investor backing emerging founders. So let's dive into it. Jack, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, that was a bit of a rambled introduction. So I'd like you to hopefully do a little bit better job and tell us about yourself, what you've done previously, what you're doing now. Just a little bit of a potted history, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries. So started my career in medical recruitment. Started off as a junior resourcer. So that's someone bashing the phone 200 calls a day to doctors and nurses, trying to get their availability for the senior recruitment team to actually place them into bookings. Worked at a variety of the...
So you were selling?
Yeah, I was selling, but more finding out who's available to work at that point, not really doing much of the selling, but learning the trade and the skills of the trade. So was lucky enough to go through the training center at a company called ID Medical, which really do provide the best training in that industry by a country mile. So worked my way up through there to recruitment consultant, left to join a couple of other large framework approved, which are government approved agencies, ending up in a position of running the A&E consultants division at Pertemps Medical. So placing A&E consultants up and down the UK. Left there to found my own business, which was KPI Health, which I'm sure we'll get onto shortly.
Definitely. And yeah, let's start with KPI Health. How it evolved, where did the idea come from? We know that you took it to 20 mil, but let's go grassroots, how it all came about and your journey into that.
So, it's actually a funny story behind it. It's kind of was right place, right time. And
interesting.
A little sprinkling of luck. So my daughter at the time, she had to go to the Royal Eye Unit at Kingston Hospital. And there was a doctor there. I had no idea what clinical insourcing was at that point. But I saw on his name tag he had Dabba Limited, so I presumed he was a locum. So I went to speak to him about locum work, and I remember as if it's yesterday, he said to me, "No, come here, my boy, you've got it all wrong." He's an older gentleman, maybe in his 70s. And he said, every nurse, every doctor, the receptionist, they all work for me. And I go, how can they all work for you? He said, it's clinical insourcing. We treat the patients on behalf of the hospital. So that was Friday evening. Saturday, Sunday, I just spent all weekend Googling what was clinical insourcing, how did it work. Saw there was a couple of companies doing it. At that time, there was maybe 3, and decided on the Monday that I was going to found a company doing it. So called up my old boss, Matt Heslem, and said, I want to do this business. Do you know anyone who can do it with me? And he laughed and said, come to my office. So I went to his office, and he had on the wall a clinical insourcing business that he wanted to do. And then we kind of joined forces on the Monday, formed a company, and then that was that. Yeah, chance encounter.
Yeah. And so you'd come from the industry, you'd experienced sort of the problem solution thing firsthand, and it kind of went from there.
Yeah, so there's 2 aspects to medical staffing. So medical recruitment is a case of the hospital, they have a staffing need, and they'll say, we need a nurse in A&E today, for example. Whereas clinical insourcing goes more into the long-term planning of patient care. So the main difference is that in a recruitment setting, you're billed per hour. So your margin is based upon how many hours a doctor works. In insourcing, you'll billed per patient. So you basically bill the ICB, who pay the hospitals, and they pay you the same way they pay the hospital. So the difference is insourcing is a lot more complex. You have to manage a whole team, not just put one person. So that could be the consultant, the nurses, the middle grades, the receptionist, and then you obviously have to ensure patient care. You have to ensure that there's no kind of problems with governance. So you essentially take on the role of the hospital, but just run it as a private company within their premises.
Got it. Cool. And so that business, you and your former boss, you joined forces and you said, yeah, let's go. What were the first steps? You said you bootstrapped it. Was it tech or was it ugly to start with? How did it all work?
Yeah, it was eventful would be the only description. So one thing I was really good at is making friends with the doctors that I worked with in my whole career through recruitment. So the first thing we wanted to do was get some strong clinical governance and clinical oversight in place to make sure that we were running these patient lists effectively. So essentially, I called up my good friend, Dr. James Harrison. He's one of the lead consultants at a large A&E department in London. Brought him in to kind of lead the governance. And then from there, we began to structure out the premise of our team and what we would take to market. The first 9 months were a real big struggle. It was just me and Matt in a cupboard, and it was like banging a head against a wall. And then we got our first shot at a hospital in Southwest England. We'd done a really good job, and the difficulty within the NHS is your first sale. After that, it's relatively easy because it's a very incestuous industry, right? Like if you're a doctor, you can only work for the NHS. So word of mouth is super
So it's
potent.
quite referral based in
So we went from 0 contracts. We've done nothing for the first 9 months, and then we ended year 1 with £3 million in revenue. Then we made a big jump year 2 up to, I think it was maybe 12. And then we had the issue of it takes you sometimes 3 months to get paid from the hospitals. And, I was maybe 27, 28, and I'm going to a bank and asking for a funding line of, £2-3 million. And yeah, with next to no assets to back that through. Yeah. So it was really difficult. Metro Bank saved us. We had, and we met sharks along the way. People who tried to, we had people who said they'd fund the business, and then they pulled the funding on payday, and then said to us they'd only do it if we give them half the company. So we had stuff like that, and luckily we basically pawned everything we owned. Everything we owned to pay the nurses, the doctors, and then that bought us an extra month. And then Metro Bank come in and give us the funding line, and they've been the partner of that business ever since. But yeah, really a fantastic business. And if it wasn't for them, we would definitely have had to sold it a long time ago.
So let's talk about like some of the growing pains that you had there. And obviously it sounds like cash flow was one of them, and like any other learnings that you've taken from that you could sort of the key sort of going from that sort of early stage to scale up journey.
Yeah, cool. So the key aspect was really the importance of cash flow and cash flow management. And I see so many really skilled recruiters, and they go to set up on their own, and 9 out of 10 of them fail. I mean, I've seen one very recently from a friend of mine, and it's because they have no experience of managing the cash flow. Now, if your business is relatively stable, then you can get by not focusing too much on it. The problem that we had was the growth of the business meant that we had nothing, we could do nothing but focus on the cash flow. That was the major problem, because we had to ensure that the invoices were always paid on time, and then having to constantly go back to the bank and say, right, it was 1 million, now 3 million, now 4 million, etc. So that would be the big take, would be that. And then the second major aspect of taken would be ensuring that in the early days you get the right people in place, and the importance in not giving equity away to the wrong people. That was a mistake we made early on. And
but how are you defining wrong?
Cultural fits, really. And one thing I find is that people are really, really good at selling themselves, and then when it comes to actually doing the work, and a lot of times the dream that they sell is not actually what materializes. We had made the mistake of, issuing shares. So there was no vesting period. I didn't
So
know
you're
what
talking
any
about
vesting
like
was for.
actual staff members here, not, we're not talking like investors and that sort of thing. It's
No
staff
investors,
members that you kind of, yeah,
yeah. So like I would more like non-executive staff members, so
sure,
people who
got
would
it.
oversee
Advisors and yeah.
advisors and stuff like that. Yeah, we give away far too much, and that was a big learning curve. And then the other aspect of it would be, as the team scales and you go from me and Matt all the way up to 30, 40 members of staff internally, and then 1,000 plus members of staff deployed up and down the country, making sure how you manage them efficiently. The importance of process. I think that's lost on so many founders. And I was really, really lucky to have Matt and learn from Matt from a process standpoint.
So had Matt run businesses before? I think you said, yeah, because he was your old boss, right? So
yeah, he had,
yeah,
yes.
because the thing is, with a lot of founders, like you say, is the tricky part is not necessarily for some of them kind of building the business. Let's say it's a tech based or tech enabled business. They build out that tech and they're good at that because they might be product people. But then going from a product person to a, in brackets, CEO and like a people manager and managing people is a totally different skill set and hard. Like, how did you transition that? How have you learned from that, or like what, how did you find that? Because you said you managed like 30 to 40 people. That's that's a mid-sized business. That's a good chunk.
Yeah, it's difficult would be the honest assessment. I find without having the proper processes in place, you lose sight of a lot of stuff.
Mm.
And then throughout the journey, when we brought in the right advisors and learning from them in terms of the importance of like dashboards and reporting and being able to spot bottlenecks before they arise, that's kind of the biggest take, is being able to visualize stuff which happens. So if I take KPI, for example, there were periods throughout our journey where we had real big problems of cash flow. Luckily, they're not. Then that was because we were growing so quick. Whereas if I take my businesses now, for example, I know the importance of a CFO, a good CFO, and good financial planning. So I have the plans in place for every single possible outcome of my business. Well, whether we go up, whether we go down, or whether we go sideways, everything is planned and in place. And it's just a case of execute the plan. Versus that stage, it was kind of a bit chaotic because neither me or Matt had grew a business that big. It was the first of both of us. Yeah. Learning on the job. Yeah, for sure.
That's fine. There's no steeper learning curve than being a founder. Yeah. So you've taken those learnings, you kind of moved on from that business, and now let's talk. That was a nice little segue into where we're at now, and I want to get onto those. Tell us about those, and then I'll dig into it a little bit and see what we can unpack with those.
Yeah, no worries. So left obviously KPI, come over to Dubai. Knew I wanted to start a tech business, but not coming from a tech background. I looked at hiring staff in London, and I wasn't very impressed with the quality of CVs that I was getting. So I basically...
What kind of people were you going for, just out of interest? Was this like
this was just
devs or product people?
A CTO to begin with, someone like an architect person. And then, the good people, the good CVs I could get were incredibly, incredibly expensive. So I basically run a series of different adverts in different cities. And I said, well, wherever we kind of get the best CTO, the best bang for our buck is where we'll go. Luckily, Dubai and the UAE as a whole is a really forward-facing, forward-thinking nation in terms of business and particularly the visa climate and getting the right people. So, like my CTO is by far the smartest human being I've ever met in my life, the hardest working human being I've ever met in my life. Her talent, she couldn't come and work in the UK because she's has a Russian passport. But in Dubai, for example, these people are welcomed. So you get access to a huge talent pool, which you don't get if you're based in the UK.
Yeah.
The wages have gone up, so it's not as cheap as when we first kind of started here 2 years ago. But yeah, it's more about India's a 3-hour flight. South Africa's 4 hours, maybe 5 hours away. Russia's 5 hours away. And the government here are really supportive. So if we need a visa, we just contact them. It's hours to get the visa issued, and then
you've got access to those kind of slightly cheaper talent talent pools, so to speak.
Yeah, it's more having access to a bigger talent pool would be my
Right.
only description. It's
Okay.
the, you know, we pay our guys very, very well, but it's more a case of, you know, if there's a really talented person who's, I don't know, if they're in Russia, for example, with the situation at the moment, it would be nigh on impossible to get that person a working visa for the UK.
Yeah,
But
right.
we can get them in Dubai, for example, and someone with her background of you know, artificial intelligence and physics PhD from Khalifa University. There's not many people like that in the world.
Right.
So to kind of have access to that talent pool was the most important aspect.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk about how that started, and you know, what did you launch with? Let's talk, you know, from a tech angle. How did this business evolve?
Yeah.
You know, what did you go to the market with? What was the strategy there?
So we launched with Kerro first to the agencies. Just because I know the world, I know the players, it was very easy for me to pick up a phone and kind of carry that kudos where people would actually speak to me. What we wanted to do was take the aspects of what a recruiter does on a day-to-day, strip it back and say, what are the individual segments of the tasks that they do and how can AI optimize that? So from an agency standpoint, it's very much how do you get your £5,000 a month, £6,000 a month billers to £10,000 a month, and how do you support them in their journey as you want to increase their billings? So we built the CRM initially with a compliance module. There's huge regulatory burdens for deploying clinical members of staff. And then we began selling to the agencies in September last year. That allowed us to collate lots of feedback on the models, further refine our models.
Yeah, so on that one,
Yep.
you said you built it and then you started selling it in. What kind of validation had you done prior to kind of building and selling?
Yeah,
Or were you just kind of working off your industry knowledge and going, I'm pretty confident I'm going to be able to sell this?
Yeah,
How did that work?
Yeah, so I don't want to say the name of the company, but there's in the medical recruitment CRM world, there's a company that has like 90% market share in the UK. Their products are terrible. Basically, we paid for a KPI Health and none of the staff used it. They all worked off spreadsheets, and that really wound me up.
Yeah. Okay.
I knew what didn't work. So I
Got
just
it.
basically said, I'm going to build something the opposite to it. And then when we started selling in September, I was kind of really taken back by how much the sales ramped up. So I think we crossed like 700K ARR within 2 months. And so then at that point, we've got quite a lot of data coming back into us. We can see how well the models are working and we're refining those models. So then I sit down with my growth head on, and coming from the NHS, I was like, well, why don't we actually develop this product out and supply it into the hospitals directly and cut out that middleman segment essentially. And that's what kind of led from Kerro through to Flexo.
Flexo, yeah. And so I'm just coming at it from a sort of founder advisory point of view and that sort of thing, and building out your tech and all that. You'd kind of worked in the industry, you'd seen the problem firsthand, and you'd also, like, there's a demand, you know, there's a demand because there's the company, whoever they are, doing like 90% market share. So there's a proven demand there, and you're just finding your little niche and executing better or different or whatever, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, correct. I am the typical customer, right? So
yeah,
I worked in a recruitment agency and I'd worked in an in-source company. So I'd essentially been a recruiter and I'd been a hospital. So I'd come at it from both sides. So I knew what I would buy. I knew what problems my company had and what we could build to improve that. So it was just a case of going to Alia, my CTO, and saying, this is what I want built. This is how I want it to work. And then she going off and building that. And then the first, our MVP wasn't very good, I'll be honest. But luckily our first couple of customers stood by us and they give us good feedback. And then the feedback allowed us to improve the product. So
the perfect founder story. They say that if you aren't ashamed of your first MVP, you launch too late. So.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. We had a couple of embarrassing demos at the start.
But that's great, because it's sort of reinforcing all the sort of crap that I go on about all the time, So, and then you're someone who's actually done it, and it's kind of true, right? So there's a reason, there's a method behind a lot of the madness.
I would say, like, my only advice I could give any like new founders would be, you genuinely I cannot express this enough. You have no idea what your customers want. Like you
Yeah.
think you know what
You
they
think
want,
you don't?
but
Yeah. It will
you
change,
actually
right?
don't. Yeah, it
As soon
does.
as it gets in their hands, they're like, "Can you do this?" Or "This is cool, but could you do this?" And I'm sure you had tons of that.
Every call, and then it's really important that your sales guys, they collate that information, they put it into
Yeah.
a tally sheet, and that informs your dev because
Yeah. Yeah. So you built your MVP custom, probably through proceeds of like your previous business or KPI or something
yes,
like that. So you were in a lucky position to be able to kind of
I
self-fund
did.
that, right?
Yeah, I put in about £700,000 seed capital, my own money,
Very cool.
to
Yeah.
to get the business started. You know, I don't have an infinite pool of money.
Yeah.
I'd done quite well, but you know, it was still scary seeing your own finances
Of
start at one
course.
number and then seeing it deplete every
Yeah.
month. But yeah, it was. I wouldn't change anything because we got a fantastic product and
Yeah.
a really good market fit.
Yeah. So where do you sit on that? You were in that lucky position of, I'm assuming you kind of built custom code, you built it yourselves, and
Yeah.
you know, you kind of built the product that you probably still have now, albeit you've iterated on it. It's not like
Yes.
I don't know, maybe you have or you haven't, but have you had to rebuild that over time, or did you build it with scalability in mind from day one?
Yeah. Yes and no. So that was issues we found that we didn't even think about. So
Yeah.
AI optimization, like our first deployment, the company it worked really, really good with 100 workers in the database. And then when they
Yeah.
went to put 100,000 workers in there, suddenly
Uh-huh.
the AI was taking 15 minutes to make a decision. So, you know, like the core product is there, but we've done a lot of optimization, mainly around
Yeah.
speed.
Yeah.
How long does it take us to work through the database? And so that was the main kind of learning point there.
Yeah, it's brilliant. But this is the unsexy stuff that we do a lot of at Loginet as well, which is that kind of like that operational stuff, the kind of fixing your tech debt, the growing pains, the scaling, and all of these things where it's like we're at 100 people, but what happens when we get to 100,000? And a lot of people don't necessarily think about that because they just think about features and all that sort. But like platform scalability is a big thing.
Yeah, for sure. And we were definitely guilty of that in the early days.
Most people are, because it's not sexy, right? And it's kind of like
Yeah.
something you prefer not to do, right? You'd rather invest money in like sexy new features and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, but it's core to your business though, right? So
Right.
like if it takes 5 seconds to load a web page, no one's gonna use your website, right? So
No, they're not. Yeah.
you have to make it as quick as possible. But again, coming from a non-tech background, I never even thought about that. You know, that wasn't. And then even my CTO, you know, she comes from heavy machine learning and AI background. So she worked for like the Abu Dhabi government building AI systems and things, but they're all very, very, very hyper specialist systems. So they're not something that's meant to be deployed at like a massive scale.
Yeah.
So I think even for her as well, it was a bit of a learning curve. But you know, we're there, and kudos to the guys here because they worked really hard to ensure that everything got optimized properly.
So now, just like to finish things up, you do a little bit of investing yourself now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So I write tickets anywhere from maybe up to the biggest one I've done is 250,000. So that's the biggest
Right.
ticket I've done.
Yeah.
All around healthcare and health tech. So
Yeah.
I invested into a company recently called APC Labs, two really, really fantastic pharmacists down in Southampton. So I'm one of two investors, and they make hormones and certain medications that should be injected subcutaneously, so like the little diabetes needles, but
Yeah.
they make it as a chewable or a film that can essentially go into your cheek. You get the same amount of drug delivered into your system without having to use a needle. So that's probably been my best investment that I've made so far. They'll do well over £1 million turnover, and it's their first full year tradings.
And I guess the question is like, why them? Why did you invest in them? What did they have that other people didn't have?
It's really about the team, right? Like,
Yeah.
Firstly, do I like the person?
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, can I offer any input at all, right? If I don't know what you're doing, then I don't know it's a safe place for me to park my money. And I want to be able to kind of provide feedback and help the guys as best as I can. So the investments to date have been that company. Then there's another company called EMR Finance, which does recruitment, invoice discounting. So because the problems that we had and we experience are basically they operate in an area of the market where the banks don't want to operate. So businesses like early stage KPI Health. So like guys like that, I can kind of help them in their journey. So it's more a case of, do I have industry experience?
Can you add the
Are
value?
the founders good? They're the only two. If they're not quite right, then I won't look at the rest of the deck, and then I'll go through after that. And then
It's
look
such
at
a
the
common
business.
theme among angel investing. You know, I had Tony Kula on, he's an angel investor based out in Berlin, and said basically very, very similar things. You know, it's just kind of like, it's the people, it's the team. You know, that at that angel stage, it's do I believe in you? Do I get on with you? Can I see myself working with you over 5-10 years or whatever it is? And do I think you're going to make this business fly?
Yeah, correct. And it's like, I'm not one of those guys who sit there and say, you know, you speak to some angel investors and they're like, if I want to make 100x on my money, I'm not that one. I'm like, can it be a good, solid, mid-sized business? And if it can get bigger than that, then that's brilliant. But for me, it's kind of like, how confident am I on the business actually working? So, you know, the two pharmacists I backed, they both run successful pharmacies before. So there was zero doubt in my mind that they knew how to run this business. They just needed manufacturing equipment that cost £1 million, and they were 250 short of the money needed to buy the equipment. So I was lucky enough to write that ticket for them. But yeah, it's fun.
Sounds like it's going to be a quality business.
Yeah, they've already had an offer to get bought out by quite a large provider in the space. Yeah, it's
tempted. I say if there's money on the table, take it.
I don't think they are, to be fair. I think they know
the value.
They know the value, and then they also introduced me to another investment, which is basically exporting pharmaceuticals to Africa, which is a feel-good business as well, because they get a lot of fake medicine in Africa, and they pay top dollar for it. So, but they're good guys. But yeah, if anyone watching this has a med tech, health tech, or traditional healthcare kind of business idea, I'm always happy to look at it, for sure.
Wicked. And actually on that one, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you? Will it be LinkedIn, do you think?
Yeah, LinkedIn at first. And if I like the deck, I'll share them my email, and then we can kind of take it from there onto a Google Meet.
Amazing. Jack, it's been fascinating. We've covered a lot there, and we've ended up on the angel investing side and all that. Give us a parting bit of wisdom for founders and people going from that kind of early stage through to scale up.
I would just say the first thing is believe in yourself, right? You're going to have so many sleepless nights where imposter syndrome can sneak in. Like, why am I at this stage? Why has my business got to this?
I already see the sound bites already for this episode. Jack, it's been an absolute pleasure. Take risks, everybody. If you like this episode, please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you on the next one. Cheers, Jack. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to LaunchBase. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share. Stay tuned for more insights on tech, funding, and product launches. See you next time.